Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Peace on earth and mercy mild, God and sinners reconciled. Joyful all ye nations rise, join the triumph of the skies. With angelic hosts walks by night. God with us is now residing. Yonder shines the infant light. Come and worship, worship Christ the newborn King. Saints before the altar bending, watching long in hope and fear. Suddenly the Lord descending in his temple shall appear. Come and worship, worship Christ the newborn King. It came upon the midnight clear, that glorious song of old, from angels bending near the earth to touch their harps of gold. Peace on the earth, goodwill to men, from heaven's all gracious King. The world in solemn stillness lay to hear the angels sing. And ye beneath life's crushing load, whose forms are bending low, who toil along the climbing way with painful steps and slow. Look now, for glad and golden hours come swiftly on
Well, today we come to week 2, and the characters that we are looking at are the angels who spoke. If we lived in Australia, we'd do Hark the Herald Angel Spoke, Praises to the Newborn Bloke. I don't know. Oh, well. You know, it probably wouldn't be as catchy, would it? It's one of those rhyming things. I'm sure it's more than that than theological. I had a professor at Oklahoma Baptist University, Dr. Warren McWilliams. He was my advisor, and I took systematic theology from him, and brilliant mind. And his hobby is going through hymnals and highlighting the heresies, and then writing the author of the heresy and the year that it was popularized. And so, you know, there's a lot of inaccuracy in hymnology, a lot of great theology, but not all hymn writers are theologians. And so occasionally we get into these kind of areas where we are kind of impressed with something that isn't necessarily biblical. If you look at most of your nativities, I find most nativities problematic. We have the wise men. If you have wise men in your nativity, fine. You put the nativity in your living room, put the wise men in the kitchen. Point them toward the living room, but get them separated because they weren't there. The angels didn't play golden harps, and let's be as consistent in Scripture as we can. We all have traditions. A lot of our traditions have been handed to us. They're things that we did as children. The family traditions that are passed from generation to generation. Some of them are things that we come up with on our own that are just near and dear to us and make the holiday special. Too much of our Christmas theology has come from Hallmark cards and these kinds of things that are just not biblically accurate. And I have no problem with traditions. I think they're wonderful. I just think they ought to point to the focus of the story and keep the main thing the main thing. But we do different. We have different passions in the season. We like to decorate at our house. Catherine takes care, and Taylor take care of the inside decorations, and I hang up the lights on the outside of the house and do those kinds of things. It's my job to retrieve the Christmas tree, which turned out to be quite the deal this year because. I went up to Lowe's right after Thanksgiving, and because it's the only place I could find trees, and they started at about $50 and went up to $170. And I said, I'm not paying that for a Christmas tree that we're going to burn in 3 weeks. And so we were in Northwest Arkansas Friday, and we tried Home Depot, and they were just as pricey as Lowe's were, and their trees looked terrible. They're pretty picked over at this point. And then there was a nursery there. We thought, we'll stop there. They always have nice stuff. Well, they had really nice stuff. They started about $100 and went up to about $250. And I got home and I said, I hate to say this, but I think we need an artificial tree this year. And we have one, a big old artificial tree that's in our storage building. So I went out to the storage building and risked life and limb to get to the back corner of that place and dragged that thing, weighs more than me, out. And I got it home. I told Catherine, I've got good news and bad news. And she said, what's the good news? And I said, I found the tree. And she says, what's the bad news? I said, we're not going to have a live one this year, And so I got it. We carried it in the house, and I went out to work on lights, and she started separating all the tree parts. And she comes out and gets me and says, where's the rest of it? And I said, what do you mean the rest of it? It's all there in the box where it's been for years. She said, no, we only have one section of trunk, and we don't have the top or the base. So what we have is a Christmas bush on a stick, and this is just not going to fly. So at that point, I just drove to Lowe's and bit the bullet and bought a decently priced tree. We asked the people in Northwest Arkansas, what's the deal? And they said, COVID. I said, I didn't know trees could get it. But apparently, it's the supply and the demand thing, and you had to place your order back in March to get Christmas trees, and it's kind of like toilet paper, and And it's not really tied to it, but somehow it is, and it's effective. So, trees and lights, why do we have trees? Why do we do Christmas trees? Where does that come from? It's got a long-standing pagan tradition, but does it have a Christian tradition? And the answer to that is yes, it does. There's some beautiful Christian traditions revolving around bringing evergreens into the house. Lights are the same thing. They're incandescent now, or LED, rather than candles. But there are Christian traditions in that. Presents, gift giving, yes. I mean, we see the wise men that we'll talk about in a couple of weeks. They brought gifts. It wasn't at Christmas, but they brought gifts. And so there is that tied to it. Food is a big deal. As you can tell, food is a big deal to me in general. But at our house, one of my family traditions that I'm in the probably third generation of are German egg noodles. We make homemade noodles, and I finally learned how to roll these things out like my dad did, where you could read the newspaper through them and slice them really thin and let them dry for several days before you boil them up in the turkey broth, and they're pretty yummy. And when we don't have them, everybody's like, I will hear over and over, this doesn't seem like Christmas. We don't have noodles. Well, I don't think that, I've been through the story several times. I don't find noodles in there, but I don't know how that points us to anything but obesity. But we have these traditions. I forgot the present illustration. I have a wonderful illustration when it comes to presents. This is the funniest thing I've read in a long time about Christmas traditions that revolve around presents. The story is about a man by the name of Larry Kunkel and his brother-in-law, Roy Collette. And it was actually picked up and reported in the New York Times. It started in 1964 when Larry Kunkel's mother gave him a pair of moleskin pants. Now, before you think somebody went out in the yard and dug up a bunch of little furry critters and sewed them together, moleskin is a cotton product. And according to Wikipedia, it's a heavy cotton fabric that is woven and then sheared to create a short, soft pile on one side like a chamois. It's less plush than velour. But when he wore them in the Minnesotan winter, they froze. And so it wasn't a practical gift, and so not wanting to just throw them away, he decided to regift them to his brother-in-law, Roy, the following Christmas. Well, apparently they weren't any more attractive to Roy than they were to Larry, so the third Christmas in, Larry re-gifts the pants back to Roy, only he stuffed them down into a 1-inch pipe. Men's pants stuffed into a 1-inch pipe. Well, that set the bar then. Every year they tried to find new and creative ways to pass these pants back and forth in ever more difficult places to get them out of. So as it turns out, the next Christmas, Larry sends them back to Roy inside a 600-pound safe with the door welded shut. So not to be outdone, then Larry sends them back to Roy in somewhere inside of a 3-foot cube of crushed metal. Something that used to be a 1974 Gremlin with a note attached that the pants are in the glove box. So it gets more complicated every time. Roy sends the pants back inside of an 8-foot tire filled with 6,000 pounds of cement with a note that said, "Have a good year." Have a good year. And these go back and forth for 25 years in this kind of a deal. But the tradition ended when Roy tried to have the pants encased in 10,000 pounds of broken glass. And apparently they were having to melt some of the glass to get the shards to stay together. And during the process, some of the molten glass got onto the moleskin pants and burned them to ash. I would have gone out and bought another pair of pants and just keep going. That's just too much fun not to keep playing with. But I'm sure it was getting expensive. It was an expensive pair of pants. But some traditions are like that. They're fun and we have a good time with them, but they really don't serve any purpose other than just trying to one up the other guy. And so we have all these things, special church services that we come to. It doesn't feel like Christmas until we hear the kids sing. That'll be next Sunday morning. The children's choirs will be singing, and those, to me, it's the candlelight Lord's Supper on that Sunday night before Christmas, and those kinds of things that I love, and that really make it feel like Christmas. And we have the angels. We've been singing a lot about the angels, and when it comes to that tradition of the angels in the Christmas story, what kind of role do they play? And how many angelic events are found in the Christmas story? When you think of the Christmas story, what do you think of in terms of the angels? Anybody? Mary and Joseph, and the angels and the shepherds and that one? Okay. There you go. Okay. Virtually none of our songs deal with those encounters with, Joseph in the dream and Mary seeing Gabriel. All of our songs revolve around the shepherds that I know of. There may be some others, but I'm not aware of any. And I think that most of us, when we think about it, that's kind of where we go to. We'll be talking about the shepherds next week. But depending on how you count them, and you can count them several different ways, I get about 6 different encounters of angels in the Christmas narrative that we have in Matthew and Luke. And so looking at those chronologically, looking them sequentially as to when and how they happened and to whom, we start off with Gabriel in Luke chapter 1 as he comes to Zechariah, a close relative of Mary, when he's ministering in the temple. And that's when he announces, Gabriel tells Zechariah that he and Elizabeth, although they are well past the time of childbearing, are going to have a son, and that son will be named John, and he will be the forerunner to the Messiah. And you remember that Zechariah is somewhat skeptical, and Gabriel causes him to be mute until the time the boy is born, and later when that happens, he confirms that the boy's name will be John, and he can speak again. The second occurrence is with Mary. There at the birth announcement that she is going to have a child, and she's confused and disturbed and trying to figure out how this is going to happen since she's engaged but not married. And Gabriel explains to her that the power of God will come over you, the Spirit of God will come over you, and He will cause her to become pregnant and have this child. And nothing is impossible with God. Nothing is impossible with God. The third encounter goes to Matthew chapter 1, verses 18 to 25. And this is where an unnamed angel, we just get an angel of the Lord, appears to Joseph in a dream. And Joseph is getting ready to divorce Mary, because in that culture, when you are engaged, betrothed, it requires divorce to break the contract. So they're not yet married, but it still requires divorce to end it. And because she's pregnant, that would also mean, according to the law, that they should take her outside of town and stone her to death because she's been sexually promiscuous. And Joseph, because he loves her, cares for her, doesn't want that to happen. So it says he's trying to take care of this, quietly. And so that's what he's doing. And the angel comes to him and says, "Don't be afraid. This child is from God. Mary's not lying to you. This is God's child. And take Mary to be your wife." And so he does. He immediately brings her to his home. And so is immediately obedient to what the Lord directs him to do. In encounter number 4, sequentially, number 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 and 5, is the account of the shepherds. And I'll just read it. We'll do it again next week too, because it's just such a beautiful passage. But we come down there in Luke's Gospel, Luke chapter 2. Luke chapter 2, beginning at verse 8. And that night there were shepherds staying in the fields nearby, guarding their flocks of sheep. And suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared among them, and the radiance of the Lord's glory surrounded them, and they were terrified. Terrified. One angel shows up, and they're terrified. But the angel reassured them, "Don't be afraid." He said, "I bring to you good news that will bring great joy to all people. The Savior, yes, the Messiah, the Lord, has been born today in Bethlehem in the city of David, and you will recognize him by this sign. You will find the baby wrapped snugly in strips of cloth and lying in a feeding trough." Suddenly, the angel was joined by a vast host of others, the armies of heaven, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest, and peace on earth to those with whom God is pleased." Now, if they were terrified at one angel, imagine when the sky rips open and the armies of heaven are there in chorus saying these things. I would have needed to stop by the house, got a clean robe, because, that one was not going to work. And then it goes on, verse 15. And then when the angels had returned to heaven, the shepherds said to each other, "Let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about." And they hurried to the village, and they found Mary and Joseph, and there was the baby lying in the feeding trough. And after seeing him, the shepherds told everyone what had happened and what the angel had said to them about this child. And all who heard the shepherd's story were astonished. But Mary kept all these things in her heart and thought about them often. And the shepherds went back to their flocks, glorifying and praising God for all that they had heard and seen, just as the angel had told them. So we have the encounter with the herald angel and then the multitudes of heaven. That's 4 and 5 respectively. And then we end with back to Matthew chapter 2, where the angel again appears to Joseph in a dream. Chapter 2, verse 13. After the wise men were gone, an angel of the Lord, appeared to Joseph in a dream. "Get up, flee to Egypt with the child and his mother," the angel said. "Stay there until I tell you to return, because Herod is going to search for the child to kill him." That night, so Joseph is dreaming in his sleep. That night, Joseph gets up, gets Mary and Jesus ready, and they leave immediately for Egypt with the child. I love the way Matthew keeps saying this. They left for Egypt with the child and his mother. And we'll talk about that more as we get farther into. "And they stayed there until Herod's death. This fulfilled what the Lord had spoken through the prophet, 'I called my son out of Egypt.' Herod was furious when he realized that the wise men had outwitted him. He sent soldiers to kill all the boys in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old and under, based on the wise men's report of when the star first appeared." So they got there about 2 years after the event. It took them about 2 years to figure out what was going on and find where it was going on. So, what's up with the angels? Why do we have so many angelic encounters right here in this part of the narrative? And I would speculate that the reason for that is God is getting ready to burst into our human realm in a physical way. This is a big moment in time. This is the big moment in time. And there is no cross without the birth. And so you have he's just doing what you would expect to supernaturally magnify what's happening here. In William Barclay's commentary, he says that in the world at large during this period of time, there was a sense that something big was about to happen. And that various writers talk about this this palpable feeling that they had that something unusual, something extraordinary is getting ready to take place, but they just didn't know what it was. But when we look at each one of these angelic encounters, there is a central truth in each one that speaks directly to us. When Gabriel tells Zechariah to have faith in God's power and his plan, Zechariah's faith wavers there at the beginning, but in the end he does. And Elizabeth becomes pregnant, just as they said, well beyond childbearing years. She becomes pregnant, and they give birth to the forerunner of Jesus. Have faith in God's power. Folks, what is too hard for God? And so we have faith in his power and his plan. Gabriel tells Mary that she has been shown marvelous grace. There are a number of denominations that put Mary at or near the level of Jesus, even making her virgin born, which is not the case. It's not necessary. And here Gabriel plainly tells her that it is God's favor, his grace, his unmerited favor that has caused her to be in this position. Was she unique? Was she one of a kind? I don't think so. Was she a godly young woman? I think so. I mean, if you were going to pick the mother of your child and you're God, you would pick a godly woman to be his earthly mother and to bring him up. And so, yes, she was special. But what happened here was a grace gift. She was human. She had sin in her life just like we all do. But in her, we see God's incredible grace mirrored or exposed. Some would argue for the first time. I think we see a lot of grace in other stories and other events prior to this. But she definitely is one of the big recipients of God's grace. In Joseph's story, he keeps getting clued in by the angels. The angels keep course correcting him, keeping him on the right path, getting him to do what he needs to do in that moment. And Joseph is always immediately obedient. He doesn't wait till the sun's up to head to Egypt. He gets up in the middle of the night after the warning, packs them up, and they take off. And had he not done so, it well could have ended quite differently for them. Immediate obedience to God's instructions. And then the shepherds, folks, if there was a social ladder in Hebrew culture, the shepherds would have been just below the bottom rung. These guys, and we'll talk about them next week at length, but they're off the charts in Hebrew society. And in Roman law, a shepherd wasn't even allowed to testify in court because they were so notorious for being liars. And so, but that is the group that God chooses to send the angels to reveal the birth of the Son. They're the first ones to be able to come and worship the King, God in flesh. Talk about grace. There's an incredible grace gift there as well. But folks, as we look at that encounter with the shepherds, they say there, that what they say together, glory to God in the highest heavens and peace on earth to those with whom God is pleased. Peace is the gift that he gives through his Son. And we talk a lot about peace, and everybody wants peace. And if you've ever watched a Miss America pageant, they all want world peace. End hunger, end poverty, world peace. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about globally world peace stuff. This is not talking about the forced cessation of violence like the UN provides. Right now, there are 90 different places in the world where UN peacekeepers are actively engaged at keeping the peace. And basically what they do is they keep people who are in opposition to one another from killing one another. Their whole idea is they can't make the people peaceful, but they can keep them from killing one another, or at least slow it down, make it harder. And they have 90 peacekeeping operations in the world today, right now. Peacekeepers. This is not talking about that either. This is a deep personal peace that can only develop when a person has been reconciled to God through Jesus Christ. This is what it's talking about. It's talking about an internal peace that that comes out of us, that flows out of us to be external, that we can export to others. You see, God, if you look around the world today, you will see that people by the millions are looking for peace. They're peace seekers. And they seek peace, but they're not finding it. And it's not enough just to seek peace. It's not enough to be a peacekeeper. Some of us get thrown into that role in our families. We get together for the holidays, and there's always the one who is the agitator, who is baiting, some other family member, and at some point they take the bait and the argument starts, and we just try to get in there and moderate. Now, everybody go to your neutral corners, let's not talk about that right now, it's the holidays, think of mom, think of dad, put the guns away, and we try to be peacekeepers. But what we're talking about here is to become a peacemaker. A peacemaker. Jesus said, he doesn't say blessed are the peace seekers. He doesn't say blessed are the peacekeepers. He said blessed are the peacemakers. Those who bring peace to a situation. And that's what we are supposed to do. We're supposed to bring the peace that only comes from knowing God. So how do we do that? We have to introduce people to God. They've got to find the same source of peace that we have found. And this is, I think, what the angels are encouraging us toward, is for us to become those people who are introducing people, calling them to the feeding trough, to see the King, to worship Him, to have their lives changed, to experience His grace, and then to have His peace grow up out of them as a fruit of the Spirit. So we consider that element of the angel's story. We have to stop and say, do you have that peace today? Are you experiencing that kind of peace right now? And if not, what is stealing your peace? What is it that's stealing your peace? Or who is it? The COVID virus, as the Ostertags talked about in the video, some of those missionaries have literally been locked in their house for 9 months. I was reading an article this week, and it was crying out for government to open the schools back up. Let the kids go back. They said they're not getting it by and large. The little ones especially, they were afraid that they would be carriers, and they're not carrying it. And they said that because of the lockdowns and the school shutdowns, more children in our country have committed suicide than have died by the virus. And it's the isolation and the loneliness and the depression that comes from this, and it's stealing a lot of people's peace. Is that where you are today? And the question is, how far are you willing to go to become a peacemaker? How far are you willing to go to become a peacemaker? Some people say, I'll make peace with that person when they do this, when they meet my standard of approval. I'll make peace with that person if they do such and such. I'll make peace with them when they try to make peace with me first. I'm not taking the first step. When they take the first step, I'll go. I read a story, and apparently it's been made into a movie. When he was 63 years old, Alvin Straight got into an argument with his brother Henry, his older brother Henry. And Henry moved away. He just packed up and left. He moved 240 miles away to Iowa and never spoke to his brother again. They had no communication at all between them whatsoever for 10 solid years over one argument. And when Henry was 80 years old, he had a stroke. And when word got back to Alvin that this had happened, he decided it was time to reunite and to seek peace with his brother before it became impossible for him to do so. But at 73 years of age, Alvin's eyesight was too poor for him to have a driver's license, so he couldn't drive a car. So Alvin loaded up a trailer with gasoline, camping gear, and food. He hooked the trailer to the back of his riding lawnmower and set off to see Henry. At a top speed of 5 miles an hour, it took Alvin 6 weeks. 6 weeks to drive from Iowa to Wisconsin in order to make peace with his brother. A month later, Henry recovered from his stroke, and he moved back. I guess they started out in Iowa. Moved back to Iowa to be closer to his family because his brother was willing to go. I mean, can you imagine it? 6 weeks on a riding lawnmower? 5 miles an hour? This guy was willing to pay a price for an opportunity that was, in all reality, fleeting. And folks, how many times do we put these things off and say, well, you know, if the stars align, or if this happens, or if that happens, then I'll do it, and we lose that person, or we lose the opportunity to make peace with that person. How far are you willing to go to make peace with those people with whom you are at odds? The angels tell us that we should be peacemakers. But folks, I'll guarantee you that you will never become a peacemaker until you have faith in God like Zechariah did. Until you believe that God is truly unlimited and he can do anything. You will not be a peacemaker until you commit yourself wholeheartedly to God's will like Mary did. Mary just said, here I am, I'm yours. Do whatever you need to do to me. When I surrendered to the ministry, 45, 46, 7 years ago, I didn't know what it meant. I had no idea at that moment that I would ever be standing behind a pulpit preaching to a congregation. None whatsoever. This was not in my mind at all. I just simply told God that my life is a blank check. You fill out the amount and I will give everything I've got to make it happen. That's what Mary did. She just said, I'm a blank check. You fill out the amount. Let it be. Let it be to me, as you have said. We will never be peacemakers until we listen for and become instantly obedient to God's direction like Joseph did. Folks, delayed obedience is disobedience. Partial obedience is disobedience. Joseph got up in the middle of the night. It wasn't convenient. He probably couldn't get into Starbucks for a coffee. You know, there's no place to gas up the donkey. You know, they just packed up what they had and left. Went immediately. We will not become peacemakers until we cast off our shame and guilt and start telling others where true peace can be found like the shepherds. Folks, these guys were the bottom of the bucket. They were notoriously unreliable. Can you imagine? The sky opened up and there were millions of angels. Yeah, right. What have you been smoking? You know, there's no way anybody's going to believe what they say. The Messiah's been born. Liar. What, he's in a cave outside of Bethlehem? That's not going to happen. You know, but they didn't care what anybody else thought. They told everyone they saw what the angel had said and what they had seen. And it was on the people from then on. They cast aside their shame and their guilt. Some of us are paralyzed with shame and guilt for things that we have done or left undone at some point in our life, and we never become the tools that God wants to use to tell other people about where the peace of God can truly be found, because we're still feeling guilty about things that we did decades ago. And we've got to get past the shame and the guilt to become peacemakers. Sometimes when I do these slides, I'm not thinking clearly. And the next one is grammatically incorrect, and I want to correct it before I put it up there. Don't beat me to it. Because Edna Merrill Painter would scold me harshly for what I put on the slide. So go ahead to the next one. It should read, with whom do you need to make peace? This is improper English, as the way I have it put up there, but I didn't catch it until this morning. With whom do you need to make peace? Who is there in your life that you are at odds with, folks, this Christmas? What better time than now to become the kind of people the angels show us that we should be? The messengers of God. I love it that the angels, they have the angelic encounter, but when they say, let's go to Bethlehem, did you see what it said? Let's go to Bethlehem. Let's see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about. Which the Lord has told us about. You say, they saw the angels, they heard God. He said, be a peacemaker. Be a peacemaker. Will you follow the guidance of God through his messengers and become peacemakers this Christmas? Will you do it? Isn't it about time? Folks, I would encourage you to take this year because, like Alvin Strait, we don't know if next year's going to happen. If they'll still be here to make peace with in a year. Let's do it now. And then finally, my last question to you this morning is, will your Christian traditions, the ones your Christmas traditions, will they point people to Jesus? Or will they just confuse people? I got a Skit Guys video I want you to see. This is hysterical. I think it makes my final point for me. Let's go ahead and roll that.
Santa, you're needed in human resources, please.
No. You got this, Petey. Come on now. Yes. I got it.
Hey, good job.
Thanks. Yeah. Hey, you got some stuff on your nose?
So, have you seen him?
No, it's my first day.
Yeah, mine too.
This may be the best day of my life.
I know. He just oozes kindness, you know? If he walked in here right now, I would totally turn into a snow puddle. They say that his eyes just radiate with love and candy, but mostly love.
Sure. They say that he makes you feel like you are the only person in the room.
Have you ever seen how the children's faces just light up when they see him?
The hope that he spreads? I can't hardly contain myself right now.
Can you imagine being friends with him?
I know. Sometimes there aren't enough words to express how amazing he is. We should celebrate him all year round. If it were up to me, we would. His love, his grace, coming to this earth to save us. Come on, guys. Let's go celebrate Jesus' birthday.
Just FYI, I was talking about Jesus the whole time.
Oh, I was too. I 100% was talking about Jesus.
Same page. Page.
Will our traditions point people to Jesus, or will they just muddy the waters, folks? The angels are a great part of the story, but the story is not about the angels. The story is about the baby in the feeding trough who becomes the man on the cross. Let's pray.